Imagine standing in the darkness before dawn on August 21st, 1942. Around you, hundreds of young men in olive-drab uniforms crouch in foxholes carved from volcanic soil. They're Marines, Americans, mostly teenagers and men barely in their 20s. Behind them stretches an airfield they've fought desperately to keep. Ahead of them, screaming out of the darkness, comes one of the most disciplined fighting forces on Earth. Japanese soldiers charging with fixed bayonets, convinced beyond any doubt that American Marines will break and run. What happens next will shatter one of the most dangerous military beliefs of the 20th century. A conviction so powerful that it shaped Japanese strategy, influenced their entire approach to the Pacific War, and led directly to their catastrophic defeat. This is the story of how Guadalcanal didn't just change a battle. It changed everything. If you're watching this because you're fascinated by the moments that altered history, the decisions that changed the course of nations, and the untold stories buried beneath the official narratives, then you need to be subscribed to Untold Realms. We explore the forgotten battles, the overlooked commanders, and the hidden turning points that textbooks barely mention. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss when we uncover another piece of history that deserves to be remembered. And if this story grabs you, if you find yourself thinking about what these Marines accomplished, please like this video and leave a comment below, telling us what period of history fascinates you most. Our community spans the globe, from military historians to casual viewers discovering these stories for the first time. Your engagement keeps these narratives alive. Now, let's dive into why Guadalcanal matters so much. To understand what happened on Guadalcanal, you need to understand what Japanese military leadership believed about themselves and about their enemies. For decades, Japanese military doctrine had been built on a concept called Yamato Damashi, translated as the spirit of Japan. This wasn't simply patriotism or national pride. This was a foundational belief system, almost religious in nature, that Japanese soldiers possessed spiritual superiority that could overcome any material disadvantage. Think about this from their perspective. The early 20th century had provided them with overwhelming evidence that their belief system worked. In 1905, Japan defeated Russia, a European superpower, in the Russo-Japanese War. A smaller Asian nation had humiliated a major world power. Japanese commanders credited this victory not to superior tactics or strategy, but to Japanese fighting spirit, to their willingness to die, to their absolute commitment to their emperor. Over the following decades, this belief hardened into absolute doctrine. By the 1930s, Japanese military instructors were teaching young officers that Western soldiers, particularly Americans, were spiritually weak. They came from materialistic cultures that prioritized comfort over sacrifice. When American soldiers faced the prospect of death, they would surrender. They would flee. They would panic. This wasn't mere speculation. Japanese commanders had convinced themselves of this through careful analysis of military history and cultural study. Then, in the opening months of the Pacific War, Everything seemed to confirm these beliefs. American and Filipino forces collapsed in the Philippines. British defenders at Singapore, a fortress Churchill called impregnable, surrendered to a Japanese force half their size. Throughout Southeast Asia, across Burma, Hong Kong, and the Dutch East Indies, Western armies crumbled before Japanese assaults. The pattern seemed undeniable. Westerners simply didn't have what it took. Now, the United States Marine Corps specifically was barely on the radar of Japanese intelligence planners. In 1942, the Marine Corps was tiny by military standards, with fewer than 70,000 men in total. Throughout the interwar years, Marines had fought small skirmishes in Central America and the Caribbean. Nicaragua, Haiti, these weren't battles that captured world attention or inspired fear. Japanese planners looked at that record and saw a second-rate military force playing at being soldiers. What Japanese intelligence completely missed was the transformation happening within the Marine Corps during the 1930s. American Marine officers, recognizing that modern warfare in the Pacific would require the ability to assault heavily fortified beaches, had begun developing entirely new doctrines. They created specialized equipment. They built training programs specifically designed for amphibious operations. They developed a culture that emphasized something the Japanese military didn't understand: individual initiative, independent thinking, and the ability of junior leaders to make decisions when communication broke down. This cultural difference would prove absolutely critical. When Colonel Kona Ichiki received orders to retake Guadalcanal from American forces who had landed in early August 1942, he saw an opportunity for personal glory rather than a serious military challenge. He had 917 men, among the best-trained soldiers Japan could field. Surely this would be enough to push some undisciplined Americans back into the sea. At about 1:30 in the morning on August 21st, Colonel Ichiki launched his assault. His soldiers charged across a sandbar at the mouth of what the Americans called the Tenaru River, shouting banzai, their bayonets fixed, and, just absolutely certain that the Americans would break right away. They had seen this tactic work all over Asia. Western troops, well, they just couldn't handle the psychological pressure. They ran. They surrendered. But this time, something different happened. The Marines didn't run. Water-cooled machine guns, carefully positioned and manned by gunners who had trained honestly for hours and hours with those weapons, opened up with just devastating accuracy. Artillery batteries, which had registered their targets before nightfall, dropped shells directly onto the assault formations. The sandbar, well, it became a killing ground. Japanese soldiers fell by the dozens and then by the hundreds. There was a Marine machine gunner named Private Al Schmid, who was blinded early in the battle when a grenade destroyed both his eyes. Blinded, with shrapnel embedded in his face, he kept operating his weapon by touch alone. His assistant gunner called out targets to help direct his fire. He stayed at his post the entire night, That just wasn't supposed to happen. American soldiers, well, they weren't supposed to do that. As dawn broke, General Vandergrift ordered a counterattack. The Marines crossed the creek upstream and swung around to encircle the surviving Japanese. Light tanks joined the assault. The Japanese soldiers found themselves trapped, surrounded, with no way out. Of Ichiki original 9 and 17 men, approximately 800 were dead. The survivors, perhaps 128, managed to escape into the jungle. Marine casualties were 35 killed and 75 wounded. For every American who fell, the Japanese lost more than 7 men. This was not what Japanese doctrine predicted. This was not supposed to happen. When news of Ichiki's destruction reached Japanese headquarters in Rabaul, senior commanders reacted with disbelief. The reports had to be wrong. A Japanese infantry regiment could not have been annihilated by American Marines. This simply wasn't possible. Rather than reassess their fundamental assumptions about American fighting capability, Japanese commanders reached a different conclusion. Ichiki had simply sent too few men. The answer was obvious: send more. Major General Kawaguchi was given command of the next attempt. He brought 6,000 men from the 35th Infantry Brigade, a veteran unit that had fought successfully in Borneo and the Philippines. Kawaguchi was more thoughtful than Ichiki. He studied the reports carefully. He understood that a frontal assault would be suicidal. Instead, he planned a sophisticated night attack through the jungle, approaching from the south where Marine defences were lighter. His plan centred on seizing a ridge running down toward Henderson Field. After the battle, this ridge would be called Edson's Ridge, or Bloody Ridge. Defending it was a force of about 800 Marines under Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson, one of the most aggressive commanders in the Marine Corps. He had fought against guerrillas in Nicaragua. His men called him Red Mike because of his hair, and they both feared and respected him. On the night of September 12th, Kawaguchi launched his assault. The fighting was intense beyond description. Japanese soldiers breached Marine lines multiple times. At one point they came within a few hundred yards of Henderson Field itself. If the ridge fell, the airfield would be lost. But the Marines held. Edson personally rallied his men, standing in the open under fire, directing counterattacks. Artillery fire, called in by forward observers, devastated Japanese assault waves. By dawn, on September 14th, Kawaguchi's attack had failed. More than 600 of his men lay dead on the ridge. The survivors retreated into the jungle, many starving, to begin a nightmare march that would kill hundreds more from disease and hunger. Vandergrift later admitted that this was the only moment during the entire campaign when he doubted the outcome. Still refusing to accept that the problem was their own beliefs about Americans, Japanese commanders escalated further. General Hyakutake arrived with the Sendai Division, one of the most illustrious units in the Japanese army. This time, over 20,000 Japanese troops would participate in a coordinated assault from multiple directions. Hyakutake was so confident of success that his staff prepared detailed plans for accepting an American surrender. The attack came on the night of October 23rd through the 25th. And on that night, a sergeant named John Basilone from Buffalo, New York, stood behind 2 sections of heavy machine guns and fought against approximately 3,000 soldiers from the Sendai Division. He fought through the night without sleep, without food, without rest. When ammunition ran low, he carried 90 pounds of weapons and ammunition across 200 yards of ground, swept by Japanese fire. When guns jammed from overheating, he repaired them under fire, burning his hands on superheated barrels. When enemy bodies piled up so high they blocked his field of fire, other Marines had to leave their positions to push the corpses aside so they could continue shooting. By the time reinforcements arrived, only Basilone and 2 other Marines from his section were still standing. He would receive the Medal of Honor for his actions. The October offensive failed completely. Japanese casualties numbered between 2,200 and 3,000 dead. American casualties were fewer than 300. The Sendai Division, one of the oldest units in the Japanese army, was shattered. What followed was slow, grinding attrition. The island that Japanese commanders had expected to retake in days became what their soldiers bitterly called Starvation Island. Japanese soldiers resorted to eating roots, grass and tree bark. They developed their own grim way of measuring survival. He who can rise to his feet has 30 days to live. He who can sit up has 20 days. By December, General Hyakutake sent a desperate message to Tokyo. No food available. We can no longer send scouts. We can do nothing to withstand the enemy's offensive. When the Japanese finally withdrew in February 1943, they left behind over 14,000 dead from combat and another 9,000 who had perished from disease and starvation. For every American killed on Guadalcanal, the Japanese lost nearly 10 men. The Marines, who had held that airfield, proved something that Japanese commanders had believed impossible. Americans could fight. Americans could hold their ground. Americans would not break. This realization spread through the Japanese military with devastating effect. In the Solomons, in New Guinea, in every subsequent campaign of the Pacific War, Japanese commanders would face opponents who would not surrender and would not run. The tactical implications were profound. Japanese commanders could no longer assume aggressive night attacks would break American lines. They could no longer count on spiritual superiority to overcome material disadvantages. Everything that came after Guadalcanal grew from what the Marines proved on that jungle-covered island. The island-hopping campaign across the Pacific, the fall of Saipan, the terrible battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the atomic bombs that ended the war. All of it was shaped by what happened when American Marines refused to accept defeat. Guadalcanal was where the myth of Japanese invincibility died. It was where everything changed. If this story moved you, if you found yourself thinking about what these Marines accomplished, please like this video and subscribe to Untold Realms. Share this with anyone who loves history, who wants to understand the moments that shaped our world. Leave a comment below telling us what aspect of this battle fascinated you most, or what period of history you'd like us to explore next. We're building a community of people who understand that history matters, that these stories deserve to be remembered and retold. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these untold stories alive. Before you go, don't forget to join our community of history explorers. Hit that red subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a journey into the untold realms. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the story and share this video with fellow history buffs. Your support helps us uncover more hidden moments from the past. Thanks for being part of our adventure. See you in the next episode.